Magic is what happens when peace is near.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Season 8 of Enlightened Conversations. This season we're diving into all things 7D consciousness, what it is, what it isn't, and how it shows up in our everyday life. I'll also be sharing concepts from my new book, Pieces of Science, towards a unified peace theory, as we explore the fascinating overlaps between spirituality, human behaviour, consciousness, and how we can integrate more peace into our lives. So, without further ado, let's dive in.
Together we are clear.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle Lightworker. Welcome back to Enlightened Conversations. Joining me again are the incredible guests from episodes 1 and 2 from this season. And together we continue exploring 7D consciousness through multiple perspectives. This time we are widening the lens into politics, leadership and governance and collective power structures. Because if consciousness shapes healing, relationships and nervous systems, could it also shape the systems we build as societies? In today's episode, we explore 7D and politics. Not politics as party lines or outrage cycles, but politics as consciousness in action. How does fear shape leadership? What role do integrity and presence play in governance? Can coherence influence systems? And how do we stay engaged with the world without becoming emotionally consumed by it? Because maybe politics isn't just happening out there. Maybe every conversation, reaction, escalation, and moment of repair contributes to the wider field we all participate in together. So let's dive in. Our first question that I've asked my wonderful guests is, how can 7D awareness inform leadership and governance? And Linda's going to kick it off.
It's not going to happen for a long time. We're peeling back the illusions, the lies, all of it with big business and politics and the entertainment industry, and that's happening. It's not going to happen overnight. I really do feel like an understanding now why Doreen Virtue stepped out of the spiritual world and she's got right into the Christian world. I really think that we need to, it's all right for us to be awake and awoke and us feel like that we need to share love out in the world, but there's atrocities happening. And the governments aren't doing anything about it, and things are happening around the world. I can remember, and this is probably off topic, but I can remember being in London maybe in 2018, and this Islamic man was being interviewed on the news, and he said, "We don't need to fight anymore, we're going to outbirth them." And I've never forgot that. And now seeing what's happening around the world, I think that we need to stand up for starters for women's and children's, girls' lives. And I think that when it comes down to politics and religion and all that sort of thing, we can't muck around anymore about people having rights to their voice and their opinions if it's not harmful to anybody else. I really think that's the way that we've got to go.
Thanks, Linda. Yep, sometimes we think that politics just happens in a vacuum, but obviously we're all conscious people. We're all conscious beings or unconscious beings contributing to the society as a whole. And I really like what you said there about bringing it back to that consciousness ourselves, our beliefs, our wounds, our scarcity patterns, our sense of worth. And in Pieces of Science, the new book that we're reflecting on with regards to these questions, we explore a very similar idea that systems don't appear out of nowhere. They're built from the nervous system, values, fears, and awareness of people creating them. So if consciousness shapes individuals, it makes sense that it would eventually shape governance too. And now we'll move on to Leanne.
Well, that's a really big question, especially at the moment. Consciousness and awareness and presence around what you put out is what you get back, and what you say or what you intend is really, really powerful. And I think intentions are huge when it comes to government and those in positions or places of power. And then because we can either use them to empower governments or others and support community and help community, or we can keep them stuck, disempowered, and lacking.
Yes, definitely, Leanne. And what Leanne brings here is a strong sense of something that we explore in Pieces of Science, that leadership and governance can either regulate systems or destabilize them. And intentions matter. Leaders can create environments that empower people, strengthen community, increase participation, and support collective well-being, or environments built on fear, division, scarcity, and disempowerment. And in Pieces of Science, we explore how systems often begin reflecting the consciousness and emotional state of the people leading them. And that also can create outrage and go viral and escalate, and then that can also impact the leader in the position as to what attention they keep demanding. Now on to Chris.
When I think about leadership through the lens of, say, 7D awareness, the biggest shift is probably moving from ego-driven leadership to responsibility-driven leadership, because a lot of politics historically has been about power. And when you think about it, it's the people in power, they're really dependent on who's got the power. So who's got it, who keeps it, even how to win the next round. It's all very egocentrical. So that tends to create a lot of short-term thinking, whereas higher awareness introduces a different question. Like, what serves the long-term well-being of people and the systems, the bigger thinking. In what I learned through NLP is values levels. So you're going through from values level 3, which most political leaders are in. So like, this is them and this is the sun, and whatever they say is the only way, to go up to the higher levels, like level 6 and level 7, which is more what's best for the community, what's best for the world. So a leader operating with a deeper consciousness or coming from those higher values levels, they're less interested in proving that they're right, and they're more interested in understanding what actually works. So it requires self-awareness, because if a leader hasn't done their own internal work, their own emotional triggers, beliefs, and insecurities, they're going to take over. So those unconscious patterns inevitably show up in the way that they lead. They're the ones that you don't want to be in charge of the red button.
That red button. What Chris is really speaking to here is the difference between reactive leadership and unified peace-informed leadership. Sometimes the quick fix, the power move, or short-term win can look successful, and people idolize it even, but it ends up being incredibly expensive later on through money, stress, division, burnout, distrust, social instability, and so on. In Pieces of Science, we explore the idea that truly conscious leadership thinks longer term, not just how do we win now, but what kind of emotional, social, and human future are we creating over time? Next, we hear from Sathiavanni.
It is again going back to the simple form of Occam's razor, in that the simplest answer is always the truth. And that is 7D influencing governance is those who govern, those who lead, must also lead via truth. What is their intention here? Because what is happening here is that because collectively elevation has begun, those who are in leadership that are not coming in from the pure intentions energetically are being called out, because you can see it. So people are becoming more wiser to the energy rather than the words being spoken. It's like, you might be, it's like a movie. It's like everyone's got the right goggles now we're looking at, and that, somebody that might be dressed up perfect and wonderful and whatever, the goggles is showing the true, real person. So the truth is coming out. So that's what's happening with 7D, humanity elevating and can see through their heart and can feel it energetically that one is not true and one is not real. So vibrationally is how we are seeing truth. So that's what 7D is doing in governing leaderships changes.
Thanks, Sathiavanni. What I love about your idea of the truth goggles is that it also applies to leadership. In Pieces of Science, we explore the difference between signal clarity and narrative manipulation. A conscious leader helps people see clearly, and a reactive or fear-based leader can distort perception through fear, division, ideology, emotional triggering, or constant noise. So, Pieces of Science asks an important question. Are leaders helping society connect more clearly to reality, or pulling people further into distortion and reactivity? And now let's hear from Karen.
Well, I think 7D awareness opens us up to be really conscious, really present with ourselves, with decisions we make, how we speak, how we treat people. It also opens us up to care about what happens in the bigger, wider community in the world. So I think for us to be a really good leader, being anchored into 7D consciousness means that we care at a very deep level about every human being and what's happening in our world. So that will then guide us as to how we want to do things, how we want to run things. Yeah.
Yes, Karen, what really stood out to me in your response was the importance of caring in leadership. And interestingly, two of the ideas that you bring up are explored in our politics chapter in Pieces of Science: inclusion without identity entrenchment, and the ability for leaders to help metabolize collective stress. So Pieces of Science explores how conscious governance can create environments where people feel connected, valued, part of something shared, whilst also helping societies move through pressure, change, and uncertainty in more coherent and regulated ways over time. So a leader has a caring capacity in those two very important ways. And now we'll move on to our next question, which is, how does consciousness shape societal structures? And let's hear it from Linda.
Well, I don't think it has shaped it yet. But I think back in 2012, when the 144,000 of us light workers was all trying to, help the world and humanity become more open and more conscious. And I think that we did that. And I think now that it's become such a trend, every second man and his dog is doing something in the wellness industry and spiritual industry. It's just showing that more and more and more people are getting to know, to understand their own feelings, to understand their own energy. I've got 3 festivals I'm talking at in the next month, and I'm showing energy in motion because people don't understand the energy, what it can do, the power of it, and it's now trying to teach people how to work with that and how to be careful and know that they are powerful. And I really think that that's going to just help more and more and more people wake up.
I feel you, Linda. Yes, we want the collective to grow conscious, and that's why we're doing this podcast. Let's keep it going, people. Okay, Leanne, what have you got to say?
If I trim that back to consciousness being about connection to a source, whether that's universe, divine, spirit, God, Buddha, Muhammad, whatever it is you believe in, societal structures are often built around core values of beliefs about what's right and wrong. And so often those spiritual practices inform those core beliefs about whether society believes peace is the ultimate aim, or justice and what that might look like, or whether it's and I come back to that power struggle, right? And you know, that ego sense of yielding power, or you know, love and presence and compassion and empathy and kindness being part of those structures.
Yes, well, Leanne, as you know, our 12 piece stabilizers are values based as structures. They're actually given equations in Peace as a Science as well. They actually are real and effective structurally. But I just wanted to share out of our chapter on politics something that I felt really guided to share. It just says, what we'd love in our political leadership style is a leadership as an invitation to higher capacity. Political leadership does not only respond to current conditions, it can also call people forward. At its best, leadership speaks not only to fear, frustration, or immediate concerns, but to deeper values: responsibility, care, contribution, and long-term thinking. It meets people not only where they are, but where they are capable of being. So there's more on that, but just to share that, 100% concur with you there on values. And now let's move on to Chris.
Societies really are just human beliefs organised into systems, in my opinion. And it's, again, going back to the values people hold eventually shape the structures that they build. So the governments, the laws, the economies, the education systems. And that's where you often see the differences between leaders of some nations. When they're egocentrical, it's all about, you know, them, the graft, and them, you know, pulling in the money. Whereas if a society operates, you know, primarily from fear or competition, the systems tend to reflect that. Whereas if people value cooperation and responsibility and long-term thinking, those qualities actually start showing up in policy and governance. Consciousness is not separate from society, really. When you think about it, it actually creates society. Every law, institution, or system actually started as an idea in someone's mind. So that just means that human consciousness evolves. Systems we build will eventually evolve as well.
Yeah, Chris, I love your systems-based thinking there. We're all just part of a system. Our individual self affects our family, affects our community, affects the greater society, the way we do policies, all of that. And I also feel that as Peace as a Science, we do prove that peace is inevitable once the systems become coherent enough and they're not fighting each other. And as we gain consciousness in our 7D awareness, that coherence lives within every person who is part of those systems. So as awareness expands, societies slowly begin recognizing that cooperation, regulation, connection, and long-term well-being are simply more sustainable than constant fragmentation and conflict. And they cost less money too. Now let's move on to Sathiavanni.
7D, Mother Earth, with what is changing within her from the core of her being, in globally how much destruction is taking place, that's where, with the awareness is coming from as well. It's triggering humans in thinking more constructively and taking more decisive decisions for the sake of humanity. But it's coming from a higher level. It's like it can't be ignored anymore. So Mother Earth, Mother Gaia, is playing a crucial role in that change, in bringing in the human figures that are prepared and ready to honor her in the right way in helping society grow and flourish in the right way.
Yeah, it's funny how some people think that Mother Earth is separate from who we are, when we're all part of a field, we're all part of a living system, we're all feeding Mother Earth. And I like to own that. I wrote a song about it called We Are Feeding the Grid. I'll have it play it in the background, because I believe we are feeding her with our peace. If we're feeding her with peace, we're helping. If we're not, we're potentially drawing from the grid to support and toxic behaviours and popping that back into the grid as well. And so when it comes to politics, I also feel like we have to be really mindful about our reactions about politics, and like really conscious about what we're intentionally sending the current political leaders and what we're fueling, because we can either fuel it and feed negativity, or we can feed peace, and solutions will emerge from that, because we're feeding coherence into the grid. Peace in and out. Boom chakalaka mic drop. Okay, on to Karen.
Well, I think that wherever we are in our consciousness, it means that we live a certain way, engage in certain ways, behaviors, our relationships with others. So consciousness is really, really important. And depending on the level of consciousness that we're anchored into will determine what's happening in our particular life, in our part of the world.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. That's a great confirmation. I think one of the lines in the songs is, what we feed it comes right back. It's on us to choose our track. The power of song is so incredible. I love it. Actually, I find that, when I need to know something, the chorus appears in my mind, and I'm reminded, like the universe giving me little nudges with all my songs. It's absolutely fascinating. Getting a little peace nudge here and there. Okay, so we're moving on to question 3 now, which is, what is the role of integrity and presence in political systems? And first up, we have Linda.
I can't believe that you said integrity and political at the same time. Sorry. Yeah, I can't answer. I can't talk for others. I don't think that there's a lot of integrity though in political groups. Everybody's out for themselves, and to me, that's not integrity. But then again, you hear there is a lady in Australian politics who has been jailed for her opinions, and I think that she probably has more integrity than a lot of other politicians. But it's just, how do they sleep at night? I don't understand.
Oh, I just want to give you a big hug, Linda. I feel your frustration. I feel that underneath what you're saying here is the frustration that many people feel around integrity in politics. The sense that doing the right thing isn't always what gets rewarded in current systems. And that's actually something we explore in Pieces of Science, like what happens when systems normalize competition, image, power, or survival over coherence, transparency, and collective well-being. And we explore different styles of leadership models as well, and how they might evolve towards rewarding regulation, integrity, long-term thinking, genuine care for people, and become more sustainable over time. Now we'll move on to Leanne.
Oh, I believe integrity is everything. It's one of my core values. And what goes on in the darkness always comes out into the light. So whether that's us in our human form, or political figures, or global figures, or those in positions of power, integrity is key. And if you're doing things that are not honouring, that are disrespectful, that are illegal, and I'm going to say it that way, it comes to light eventually. It may just take a little bit of time to happen, You got to trust the timing of source, universe, divine. And what goes out always comes back.
Yep, it sure does come out in the light. I agree, Leanne. And what we explore in Pieces of Science is the idea that integrity eventually reveals itself over time, for sure. You can hold an image together only for so long, but incoherence always leaves signals eventually. And we explore how systems naturally move towards exposing fragmentation over time, while integrity tends to create trust and stability and long-term coherence. In many ways, it's not moral, it's structural, and it's exposed over time when there is a lack of it. Now we'll move on to Chris.
Integrity is fundamental because without trust, systems just begin to weaken. People need to believe that those making the decisions are acting with the same level of integrity as we expect when we vote them in or whatever. So when people making the decisions are actually acting with some level of honesty and responsibility, it all starts to work really well. Presence also plays a role because leaders who are present tend to listen better. They're less reactive, less defensive, and certainly capable of considering other perspectives. So when leaders operate purely from pressure or ego, decisions become reactive. However, when someone's present and grounded, I think that they can hold complexity without immediately jumping, say to a simplistic answer. And in politics, most real problems are really complex. So presence allows leaders to probably respond more thoughtfully rather than react emotionally.
Ooh, Chris, you've touched on what we call ultimate coherence, which is the ability to hold complexity and those dimensional layers of 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D. And this is where this ultimate coherence emerges, where you can have this capacity to hold the chaos without fragmentation. And in many ways, conscious leaders are not about having like all the answers. They're about remaining present, regulated, and coherent enough to navigate complexity without collapsing the field around you or collapsing yourself. That's a big one. It's actually I'll give you a tease on this. It's actually at the back of the book on the last chapter, but I won't tell you what the chapter name is because it might give it away. Now let's hear from Sathiavanni.
It's as simple as you reap what you sow. That statement. If you're coming from truth, it's going to flow. Simple fact is social media crumbling in that for so long, illusion has what has driven it. 7D is breaking that down and showing the truth. So even in a sense of filters being used and everything's looking great, this is an example in terms of like influencers, raking in millions and so forth, and then being caught out that they're using filters. That's what's being highlighted. Where is the integrity here? Where is the truth? And in turn, it's helping those individuals realize, oh my God, okay, I'm actually not earning an honest living. So it's very much the divine laws, the universal laws is what is at play here. So this is simple orchestrations that is coming to the surface.
Thanks, Annie. I think my hope is that influencers will evolve to the point where they can feel the emptiness of just the money making from influencing, and they actually start to become peacefluencers or truthfluencers, and they use their huge accounts to promote good and to expand consciousness rather than contract it into the 3D material world. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's move on to Karen.
Oh, I think integrity and presence would mean very different political paths for people, I think it would be an incredible thing if every single person in politics was anchored into integrity and presence. It makes us a lot more. We take ownership of what is ours and what is it that we're meant to be doing for the greater good.
Yes, presence is so important, and thank you for keeping on bringing up coming back to the greater good, because leadership that thinks beyond individual gain, ego, or short-term advantage strongly aligns with peace as a science, because we explore the idea that coherent systems naturally begin orienting towards collective well-being over time. So the leadership will change, and the more conscious a system becomes, the more it recognises that thriving isn't truly sustainable unless it expands beyond the self and considers the whole. So the more of us that expand our thinking, the more of us will choose leaders that also mirror that thinking. So that's the good news. And I love good news, don't you? Okay, and the fourth question we have is, how can individuals influence politics consciously in daily life? Let's hear from Linda. People power.
Yeah, well, who you vote for starters. But it really is being authentic to who you are, being authentic with your beliefs. And I believe once you're on your spiritual journey and that you've got rid of a lot of and done that purging and worked on yourself, that you are guided towards the people that you know will be helping people, being in service, because that's what it's all about. Us being spiritual and learning our lessons and learning our values and our virtues here on this learning planet is so that we can evolve. And it just needs to, I think we're not at the generation that are involved in public at the moment that are going to be able to help that come forward. I think that we're a couple of generations away.
Yeah, well, that might be true, Linda, because, in our book, we do talk about how these things take time and they evolve. And I think what's important for me as an individual, and hopefully for you all listening, is how we have compassion and hold space for that evolution instead of getting to our anger about it. Because I find that with expansion and our own awakening and integration, we have more capacity for kindness, not less, more capacity to hold complexity and chaos, and more capacity for patience. And I think that's what's called for. And now on to Leanne.
Embrace your passion, what you're passionate about. Love what, come back to what your core values are, and advocate for those things, whether it's on a community level, whether it's with organizations that can then have an impact, or whether it's one-on-one, or through systemic change or community change. So how people can create or inform those changes is advocate, and do that from, and I'm going to say this, and it's interesting, I read about it this morning, do that from a strengths-based perspective, which means not coming at it from a lack of, it's what strengths do you have, or do this particular group of people that you might be advocating for have, that you can then step into then bolstering.
Thanks, Leanne. That's awesome. I love the idea that we are passionate about something, and especially when we have that 7D perspective, we don't get stuck in those rigid roles and attached to like a sense of things for a belonging in that 6D consciousness, like in a cult or something, how you can get culty with the political scene. So we really do address that in the book, and I really want to commend you by saying not coming from a place of lack, we're coming from a strength-based, because we're building on what feels right and we're aligned, and it's a resonance that we're matching instead of a gap that needs filling inside of us. There's a big difference. And now on to Chris.
I suppose most people think politics only happens in parliaments or, around elections. But politics actually happens in conversations, communities, workplaces, and families every day. the way people really discuss issues matter. Because if conversations are driven by blame or anger or division, that actually spreads. If conversations are driven by curiosity and respect and thoughtful discussion, that spreads too. So individuals influence political culture through the way they communicate, and the information they share and the way they treat people with different viewpoints makes such a difference. And of course, through voting and civic engagement, the tone of society is shaped by millions of everyday interactions.
Thanks, Chris, for bringing that up. How we speak to each other matters. It certainly does. And I think coming from a 7D perspective, we can hold differences of opinion and use our capacity to hold complexity in the way we listen to how people have come to their ideas around their political viewpoints. So we explore peace as a transmissible energy. So how we talk, also the intention behind how we address conversations with people also transmits as well. So we need to take responsibility for that as people in a political conversation. Well, not just what people are saying, but how we respond also matters as well. And now let's hear from Sathiavanni.
How I've been taught this by the higher divine guides when I do have my conference calls with them is how you influence humanity, society, is by focusing on your world, your inner world, and the world that you're creating on the path that you're on. When you focus on that, it will naturally have a ripple effect, and that will grow. That's how you influence, by how you live and by how you do things.
Hallelujah! Thank you, Sathiavanni. I love that. That's how I live my life. That's all I have to say about that. On to Karen.
I think for us as individuals, because I think we can feel really disempowered when it comes to politics, that we're not listened to. So I guess being very conscious ourselves of how we're living, conscious, aware, present with how we are and what we're bringing into life. And when we communicate from that place and that does radiate out, I guess that's a way that we can help to affect change and bring this into politics and policies, procedures, that affect us all.
Yeah, that's right, Karen. And reinforcing that whole idea of what we bring to the table is so important. Let's now move on to our fifth question, which is what challenges arise when bringing higher consciousness into governance? Take it away, Linda.
You really have to think about like the tall poppy syndrome. I think that what people feel like when you have somebody that's open and they're looking because they're used to the cycles that they've been in, that somebody wants something, that somebody's after something. And I think that we will slowly remove that so that they know that people are there to have integrity and to be authentic. I think that when you're talking to somebody and you can read their energy and what they're feeling, that you actually are going to know who is the powers to be, who should be doing that. I think a lot of things has to be policed. And when I say policed, I can't find another word for it at the moment. I don't mean the police, but people's knowledge and their wisdom and their background, I think how they've grown, what they've evolved to be like as adults and as humans, I think that needs to be taken into account as well.
That's interesting that, we do more exploration into who that person is or how they got to evolve into who they are today, and taking more time to ascertain that and understanding who this leader is, not just what they're capable of right now, but what has shaped them. That's an interesting point of view, Linda. Thank you. And we do talk about choosing politicians and a process that we can consciously choose politicians in the book. And it might surprise you what we came to in that. Now let's hear from Leanne.
You have humans in that space with their own beliefs and their own willingness to connect in with that higher source or that higher consciousness. There may be people who are in that denser, heavier, lacking emotional space or mindset that goes, no, this is how it's done, this is the way it's always done. No openness to that. So, it's about navigating those barriers and looking at what are the opportunities there that you can step into to advocate for doing things differently. And that takes connection and relationships and persistence and dedication and all of those things, and a lot of patience.
Yes, it sure does. And a lot of creativity too. Sometimes that open-mindedness principle as a stabilizer for peace calls us to really step outside the box and to be creative in the way we might suggest things as well. And that doesn't come when we're in reaction. We really need to step into that open-mindedness so that the dust settles, and then we can come from more of a strength-based perspective because we have more alignment with our 7D consciousness and the solutions bubble up. It's kind of interesting how that happens. Now let's hear from Chris.
One challenge is that political systems are often built around competition and winning. So elections, election cycles reward short-term strategies rather than long-term thinking. And the other challenge really is the human psychology, because people like simple answers, especially during uncertain times. But most societal problems really are complex and require nuance or higher awareness, because that tends to bring more complexity to the conversation, which is helpful, but sometimes harder to communicate. And then the resistance to change builds up. Anytime someone brings a more conscious or collaborative approach to a competitive system, it just seems to get pushback. So, and they, unfortunately, they don't tend to win elections, because if they're actually being fair and just, they tend to be pushed back. So we're maybe in a little bit of a win-win or lose-lose type situation.
Yes, Chris, what Chris brings to our attention here is connecting to something that we explore, which is how we choose politicians and how future systems may evolve beyond purely human bias and competition. So that's a really big one. Peace as a Science explores the possibility that AI and advanced systems could eventually assist governance by helping process complexity, long-term consequences, large-scale data, and collective needs much more coherently, without hidden agendas and, money under the tables and all those kind of things that are currently at play in the world in politics. So not replacing humanity, but potentially supporting more informed, less reactive decision-making when guided by conscious human values that align with the system that we all agree on collectively, and to be able to maintain that over time, not just when they're voted in. Now let's move on to Sathiavanni.
There's always going to be conflict. There's always going to be challenges there, because there are many who are vibrating in different frequencies and different vibrations and different numbers, and they all do serve a purpose. And the challenge here is also those who are in that high vibration is also not to get frustrated, but is also part of their lesson is, okay, how do I go back to the drawing board so that I can articulate and show, not to teach, not to lead or not, but how to share that knowledge that is going to be received well and for that person to awaken. So it is a give and take of mutual growth, because no one is an expert in anything and no one is better than anyone. We're always growing. So that's where the tricky part is, because it's there for a reason as well.
I love how you just put humility back on the table in politics, Sathiavanni. Well done. Tick. No one's better than anyone else. We've always got something to learn. That's correct. And political systems are complex. And if the more of us in the political system who have that 7D awareness, we'll have to navigate and hold complexity around us. So that is so true. Well done. And on to Karen.
Possibly other people sitting in a lower vibration that, maybe don't have an awareness of this higher consciousness, are used to a certain way of doing things. To me, that would be where there could be issues. And I think that the beauty with 7D consciousness is there's a lot of compassion in how we communicate, where we have an intentional communication style that allows the listening of everyone's opinions, and we want a peaceful outcome. Whether other people are open to that, it's not always, they're not always going to be, but I guess we can still sit in that ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true, Karen, is that there's always going to be that around us, and whether we can choose to sit in that ourselves, our intentional serenity is really important. And now we're on to our last question, which is any advice for listeners to stay engaged without being overwhelmed? And Linda, let's hear from you first.
Yeah. So in theta healing, so I remove myself from I go up to the creator on the 7th plane. I remove myself from the mass consciousness of this. It is not my truth. It is not my true north. So I remove myself from that, and I've asked the creator to do that. So I know stuff and I research. I don't watch free to air, but I research what I want. I like to be up to date with stuff, and you can go down that rabbit hole and go deep if you want to. But I make sure that I remove myself from the mass consciousness. I remove myself from the media. I remove myself from the thought processes around that, the negativity. So it is still the intent and your connection to the creator. The stronger your intent and the stronger your connection with the creator, you're looked after. You just don't really have to do anything. You're just looked after.
The question asks how we can stay engaged, but sometimes we need to unplug from what we don't resonate with and plug into what we do resonate with, so we can cope and we don't get overwhelmed. And I think the way Linda has expressed that, in the way she does that with herself, between herself and creator, is a really good example of how we can do that. There are other ways to do that, but that's a really great example. Next, let's hear from Leanne.
Yeah, I think and politics and power and all of those things that are happening at the community level can have a significant impact on us humanly. And so we can get pulled into that chaos or that drama or that those belief systems that are there. I would say keep your feet really solidly on the ground and really present in your body and feel into what feels harmonious or disharmonious for you. And when we come back to harmony within ourselves, we have the ability to create bigger and better change and longer lasting change than if we come at it from chaos and drama and kind of that anger energy.
Yeah, staying grounded is super important, and being in your body and really checking in with what resonates and what doesn't, and maintaining that harmony within. Totally agree with that. And we can't affect good change if we're coming from a space of dissonance. We need to resolve that within ourselves first, and then take those steps to try and create the world we want. But it starts from within ourselves for sure. Now let's move on and hear from Chris.
I could take a tip out of my tree and turn the television off. However, you really need to protect your nervous system. Politics can easily become overwhelming if people consume it constantly. So I talk to people about the circle of control, the circle of influence, and the circle of concern. And if you understand what you have control of, you've got control of how you act, how you react, how you think, what you do. everything to do with you. What you haven't got, what you've got influence over but no control over are what other people think, say, do. You can influence by if someone's having a conversation and they're maybe gossiping about someone or whinging about politics. You can change the topic, you can change the subject, you can calm the situation down. You can influence where you can't control. And then there's the stuff we can't control. We can't control politics. We can't control world wars. We can't control climate change. So I always say 85% of your efforts should be around the circle of control, what you can control, another 10% around what you can influence, and probably 5%, spend 5% of your entire world on what you can't control.
What a great analogy. I love that. And I feel like how that relates to those circles of control, influence and concern relate to pieces of science, because we explore how people become overwhelmed when they try to carry the entire collective field at once. And higher consciousness isn't about carrying all that. Everybody else is not evolved enoughness in their own mind. It's or about controlling everything or fixing everyone. It's about recognizing where we can genuinely create coherence and inner peace, and from there influence outcomes, contribute consciously, and then letting go of what sits outside our actual capacity to regulate. And we even have a little visual in the book that we described as the womb of transformation, where if you're feeling overwhelmed and plugged into everything too much, you can pop what you feel needs transforming into the womb of transformation, but it has its own timeline, choices, will, and whoever's in there has the capacity to make that choice for themselves when they're ready. And so it alleviates that burden that we're carrying and that overwhelm and that toxic guilt that we might feel from not solving everything that we might have inherited from family history and patterns. Now let's hear from Sathiavanni.
It can be very, very challenging, because for some it's going to be very triggering. So if you're choosing to view or watch or read, go into it with an open mindset, and or even create a very calming environment for yourself. So watch it when you're having have a foot spa or something like that, because as you're getting a foot spa, you're relaxed and all the energy is being cleared out. Then you can sort of watch the news or read what's going on and so forth. But it's about just in doses would be enough for now, because the energy is really, really intense at the moment and it is quite triggering. So just be aware of your own, the more you're aware of yourself, that if you know that if you're going to see things where, things are being blown up, or if you're going to be seeing, like house being burnt down or this, that, and the other, it's going to trigger you, then just take caution with that. So it's about being more aware of yourself, what you can handle and what you can't handle. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes the news can be a real getting to know you process, can't it? Like, oh my goodness, I can't handle that. Or, you know what, I've got more capacity to handle that now. And it's a evolving thing. It has been for myself. And I think, it is a getting to know you and a pacing process. I do love the idea of a foot spa while watching something like the news or something, like knowing that you're nurturing yourself at the same time. That is a cool example. Awesome. And lastly, we're hearing from Karen.
Probably doing our own stuff, taking responsibility for our own triggers and being really present with, again, how we're choosing to live. Because the more people that are present and bring integrity and consciousness into how we're living, then we're building that through the world, which will have an effect on everything eventually.
Yes, that's right. We don't have to be martyrs and watch everything and just think, oh, we should be able to handle it. No, you shouldn't. You just do you. And that's enough, and it's always enough. to just be at peace with where you're at the moment, not judge you and compare yourself to other people. So that brings us to the end of our wonderful episode on 7D and politics. My goodness, what a huge episode it turned out to be. We're going to jump into understanding 7D consciousness with more of a neurodivergent lens. So hands up who can relate to being a bit neurodivergent. I certainly can. So hope you can join us next time on Enlightened Conversations. Big blessings to everybody. Bye for now. Peace in and peace out.
Is what happens when